Hi everyone, my name is Krista and I am a trainer working with Operation Pause for Homes. I have my certification as a certified canine training and behavior specialist, and I have been working in animal welfare for 7 years now. I am excited to share my knowledge with you and to take any questions that you may have. Today's topic that we're going to be discussing is introducing pets with resident pets. And the first thing that we're just going to preface this with is that going to a new home is stressful. Even though we know that we are going to be taking them home and loving this pet, they don't know us yet. They don't know the routine or their new environment yet. So it is stressful for them. And it's also stressful for our resident pets that we have because we're disrupting their routine. And now they're meeting this new pet who they have to learn is being integrated into their home life. So since we know that we're going to be stressing them out through this initial process of meeting each other, our job is to reduce the stressors, to limit the opportunities for disagreements between our new pets. Please remember that all pets are individuals, so you need to monitor each pet's behavior. And some pets may get along much faster than others, and some may turn out to just coexist happily and not be, the best of friends. So today, what we are going to be discussing is some best practices. And while we want all of our pets to be best friends, it rarely happens instantly, although that can be the case, and there are instances that does happen. And in those cases, I'm very excited if you've had that experience. So moving on to our next slide, we are going to be talking about bringing a new dog home with resident dogs. So we're going to go over both dogs and cats today and talking a little bit about each and integrating them together. So right now we're going to focus on new dogs with resident dogs. And one of the first things that we want to do to prepare for a new dog coming home is we want to pick up any high value objects. Even if your dog isn't usually like super invested in their toys and doesn't usually have an issue with, you picking up the toys, they may feel a little differently about it when a new dog is in the picture. I've even had circumstances where people have said like, well, they haven't played with that toy in months, so I didn't think it would be high value. But then when the new dog picked it up, it was suddenly, wait, that's my toy. So I do like to say that that's one of the ways that our dogs can be like toddlers is I did not care about that toy until you had it, and now I care about that toy again. So we want to make sure that we're picking up any high value objects like toys. We don't want to leave out any bones or chews that could be considered high value. And we also want to make sure that we're picking up any empty food bowls. I know a lot of us have a habit of, leaving toys around for our dog to play with, leaving food bowls on the ground even after they're done eating. But we just want to eliminate as many risk factors as possible when we're bringing a new animal into the space. And we also need to remember that we don't decide what's high value for the dogs, they do. So even things that we will have to watch for and monitor will also be things like spaces such as couches, and even us. We can be a high value resource for our dogs. So we want to make sure that any of those that can be eliminated are eliminated before the new dog comes home. When possible, which I hope it's always possible, try to have the dogs meet somewhere neutral. So this can be like meeting up at a park, things like that. We don't want either dog to feel defensive of their space. When we're first meeting, we want our first meeting to go as smoothly as possible. So going to a neutral location is very helpful for eliminating some of those extra stressors. And then when you do bring the new dog home, I like to recommend that hopefully you have a friend or a family member who can maybe take your resident dog for a walk while the new dog comes in and explores the space. If you don't have someone who can take the dog for a walk, but you do have a fenced yard that your dog is used to being in. Obviously, if they're not used to being left alone in a yard, please don't take this as the opportunity to try that for the first time. But anytime that so we want to make sure that we are allowing our new dog to come into the space without the other dog present. This will reduce a lot of stress. And it's also going to allow that dog the opportunity to explore without, stressing out our resident dog by, trying to close our resident dog off somewhere while the other dog explores. That could cause, barking and high arousal from our resident dog. So if it's possible to not have them in the space at all, that is definitely best case scenario. And that will also allow the new dog to leave their scent. I'm not talking about marking or anything like that. Dogs' noses are much better than ours. So I'm just talking about the scent of a new dog to be in the house before the other dog comes in, which can start to kind of help integrate them because you're integrating their scents. And then once that new dog has had the opportunity to explore, you'll want to kind of swap the dogs and allow your resident dog to go back in the house now with that new dog smell in the home while the new dog is not in the home. And that way they can kind of take their time and be like, who was here, kind of smelling everything, again, in a less stressful type of situation. Another good idea is if you have the opportunity, perhaps you're taking this new dog from someone who was a foster. If you can take a blanket that already has the new dog's smell on it, that can also help to get the dogs acclimated to each other. If you can give your new dog a blanket of your old dogs and vice versa so that they have each other's scent, and that will often help to integrate them a little bit more smoothly as if they can already smell each other without having to be together 24/7. And then once both dogs have had the opportunity to explore the home, we'll want to take a walk together. Walks together can be really good bonding exercises for dogs, so this can start to become part of your daily routine to help them bond and get acclimated together. And walking together also allows them the opportunity to participate in other stress relieving behaviors such as sniffing while being around each other. And sometimes you'll pick up on the fact that our dogs start to mirror each other's behavior. So one dog starts sniffing, oh, what are you sniffing over here? And that's very good for bonding for them. It also, as long as you're able to have a handler for each dog, which is definitely ideal, it allows you to get a little bit more space if you see that one dog is a little bit more stressed or anything like that. You can get a little bit more space from each other, or come together if you notice that both dogs are calm and relaxed. And we also want to make sure that anytime we are noticing calm behavior, and, I really like to reward things like not being fixated on the other dog. So anytime we're seeing that calm behavior, make sure that you're praising each dog. Maybe not have treats together right away, maybe not that very first day, but then you can start to practice handing single treats off. Anything larger than a bite size, I recommend separating for, especially when they're first together. And we're going to go over some other best practices. So just like I was saying with treats, we want to make sure that we are separating our dogs to feed. Food is something that is very commonly a high value resource. And as I said before, even making sure those empty bowls are picked up, because sometimes just the possibility that there will be food can be a reason for a dog to guard a bowl. So we just want to eliminate any opportunities for disagreements. Feeding dogs separately can be done in a number of different ways. You'll find what works best for you. Some people like to feed in each dog's crate, or a crate and someone's closed in a kitchen or something like that. You can even use baby gates, different things like that, different ideas. But essentially, it's just to make sure that we don't have that time to argue. They know that they are secure, they're going to get their meal, and nobody's going to take their food, and therefore no reason to guard it. I also recommend when you bring a new dog home to leave a drag leash on at least one dog when they are spending time together. This way, if you start to notice any concerning behaviors or things that you're like, you know what, I think maybe we'll take a break, it is a lot easier to regain control of one dog and to redirect their behavior if they already have a leash attached. And, you know, especially if you start to notice something and you can just, you know, step on the leash or something to that effect. Initially, I would say to keep them tethered to someone and then eventually leave it as a drag leash. And that way you have a little bit more control of the situation, especially if there is an altercation that starts to occur. Having a leash on can also help prevent you from getting your hands in the mix if you're trying to break them up. Something else that is really important is to make sure that the dogs have opportunities to be apart. You don't want them to have to go from not having to be around this dog ever to now I have to be with you 24/7. So we'll want to make sure that we're providing them opportunities to be apart, as well as safe spaces where they can go to be alone and allow them time to decompress. And that can be accomplished with the use of crates. It can also be accomplished with the use of baby gates and with us instituting some break time. So that is good for both dogs to have some time apart. Some other important things for both of our dogs in this situation, both the new dog and our resident dog, but our resident dog in particular, is making sure that they're getting individual quality time with the owners. One thing that can cause some additional disputes is if, you know, a little bit of, you know, sibling jealousy of this new baby came in and now they're getting all the attention. So if we give some individual quality time with the owners, that can help things be a little bit smoother between the dogs as well. We also want to make sure, and I know that, you know, again, a lot of people want our dogs to be best friends right away, and we want them to have a buddy when we're not in the house. But especially initially, we're going to want to make sure that when they are not monitored by a person, that they're going to be separated. We don't want anything to happen when we are not home to intervene. I have definitely seen some things in my past history of working in a veterinary ER, and it's just safest to separate your dogs if you are not there to monitor, especially when you have a new dog that you don't know yet and your dog doesn't know yet. The other thing that can help reduce some stress, especially in your resident dog, is to stick to their routine that they had before the new dog came in as much as possible. Of course, this is going to be slightly altered because now you're going to be handling more than one dog. So you're going to want to make sure that you're sticking to your resident dog's routine as much as possible. Of course, it is going to be altered because now you're going to have 2 dogs. So if you normally get up in the morning and feed breakfast right away, you're going to want to maintain that as much as possible to continue that routine. Because if we can keep our routine the same, I don't know about you, but when routine changes happen, I get pretty stressed out. So our dogs do too. So as much that we can keep the same as possible is going to be best for them. We also need to accept, this goes back to, dogs being the best of friends. We need to accept that sometimes our dogs do like playmates, but in the home they might be like, okay, well, I'm okay with this roommate. But some dogs like playmates outside of the home and not necessarily want a roommate inside the home. So we do need to be willing to accept that our dog, even if they get along with dogs outside the home, may not want to live with another dog. And we do have to be okay with that. I always say that as long as they can coexist, then we are okay. But we do need to understand that playing with a dog outside of the home and then getting to go home and lay on your couch is different than living with another dog. So that's just something to keep in mind. Something else to keep in mind when you are looking for another dog and you have a resident dog is what your dog's play style is, because play styles do differ vastly between dogs. And sometimes when we mismatch that play style, that could be a cause for rubbing the wrong way. If you have a dog who likes to wrestle and you have another dog who likes to play a game of chase, and the dog who's trying to get your dog to chase them is trying to wrestle, it's just a mismatch of energy and it may not work out. I'm not saying that different play styles can't live successfully together, but it is something to consider when you are looking for a new dog, is how does your dog like to play, because that may be helpful in matching the right dog to your dog. And the last reminder that I want to give is, please remember that good dog communication does include growling, especially when they first get home. These dogs are trying to learn each other, trying to learn what each dog will accept of each other. And a little growl can be like, hey man, I want my space right now. Even a flash of teeth or a corrective snap can all be effective ways of communicating and not necessarily a cause for concern. It is them setting their boundaries and communicating their feelings. And as long as the other dog listens to what the dog who is growling or flashing teeth is saying and backs off or is like, sorry, man, I get you, I'll walk away. As long as they're listening to each other and not escalating, I recommend not intervening. But again, this is when, having a drag leash on one of the dogs can be useful, is if you notice that one dog doesn't seem to be understanding or listening, that is when we may have to intervene and separate so that they can learn how to appropriately communicate. And if you're picking up on signals that one dog just doesn't seem to be getting, go ahead and separate so that we don't escalate into something further. And on our next slide, we're going to talk about the difference when we are introducing a puppy into the new home with some already adult dogs. So the really big thing to remember is that even if your dog likes other dogs, it doesn't mean they're going to be good with puppies. Puppies are a lot for us, and they're also a lot for other dogs. Puppies need to learn, and not everybody is as good of a teacher as other dogs are. Some dogs are really great with puppies and can be very tolerant and then do what we call puppy squashing and like put a paw on them and be like, settle. Okay, are you good? And some are very, very good at, teaching a puppy and being tolerant of their tiny puppy teeth. And some adult dogs are not. And they're going to look at you like, why did you bring this thing into my house? And some of our older dogs who are not as willing to correct our puppies are going to depend on us to referee the puppy so that the puppy's not just running all over them. Puppies are a lot, and some adults are really, really good with them, and some adults are a little too tolerant of their behavior and will just let them get away with things. And some don't want anything to do with puppies. So it is important that we watch our adult dogs in particular and recognize if they need a break from being around the puppy so that we can offer that to them. One thing that I recommend for puppies, regardless of whether they're coming into a home with another dog or not, is to have structured breaks or nap time. Not only does this give your adult dog a breather from the puppy or us a breather from the puppy, but it teaches your puppy that individual activities and quiet time are rewarding as well. Additionally, puppies and adolescent dogs, so even as they get into 6, 8, 9 months old, will still need naps, even though they may protest and say that they don't need a nap. Typically, they will start to participate in worse behaviors such as persistent mouthing. Adult dogs they know when they're done playing and they'll just start to walk away and not really continue to engage in play, and the puppy may be persistently trying to get them to play. And they start to misbehave a lot more when they're tired, again, just like toddlers. So having structured nap time or quiet time throughout the day is very helpful to keep everyone happy. I typically recommend that when you're doing these structured nap times, in order to have a positive association with their crate, you can use crate time for this. And I also recommend giving the puppy something such as a Kong, frozen with some nice snacks, to give them something to do so that we prevent them from just crying for that initial period of time when we first put them in the crate. Because usually if we give them something to focus on, they can focus on that, and then you'll notice that they'll crash out for a nap. So that can definitely be helpful for our adult dogs to get that break, in addition to helping to train the puppy that quiet time is good, nap time is good, creating a positive association with the crate so that when you do need to put them in the crate, they won't be as stressed out. Something else that I wanted to discuss while we're talking about puppies is littermate syndrome. It's not scientifically proven that it is a legitimate thing. However, there is plenty of anecdotal evidence to make me steer away from sending littermates from the same home into a house together. What has been documented pretty thoroughly is one of two reactions when you see littermate syndrome, and I'm not saying this happens with every pair of puppies that goes home from the same litter. Some are just fine, and I'm thrilled for you if that is your case. That is awesome, but there is so much documentation regarding littermate syndrome and the additional stress that it can cause if it does crop up, that it is honestly just best not to adopt two littermates. And one option that we see is we see them get an unhealthy attachment to each other, in that any separation, like say for grooming or something like that, is beyond stressful to them, and that they are just unhealthily attached to each other. And the other option that we have when we see littermate syndrome is as they grow up, and especially as they grow into their adolescent phase and are starting to reach adulthood, is even if they got along as they were younger, they now are having altercations and no longer getting along. I have seen this result in some pretty severe fights, and people who have loved these puppies since they were very itty bitty are now having to decide whether or not to give up one or both of their dogs. So with that additional stress, it's honestly just best to steer away from adopting two siblings together. And one thing that I actually recommend is one thing we don't want to do, is say, okay, we're going to adopt this one from this litter, and then we'll get this one who's around the same age from a different litter. That has often had the same types of consequences. And I think it may have to do more with the developmental stages that they're going through. So what I recommend is actually, if you are interested in becoming a multi-dog household but don't currently have a dog, and this can be puppy or adult, say you adopt an adult dog, in order to allow them to fully adjust to the routine and for you to fully know them and them to fully know you and for the dog to feel fully comfortable, I recommend waiting at least 6 months in between adoptions. Now, this is obviously different if the dogs have a known history of living together, say that they have always lived together and unfortunately their owner passed away or something to that effect, or their owner was no longer able to keep them and they were surrendered together. If they have lived together previously, this, I feel, does not apply, although we will still want to monitor them coming into the home together because it is a new environment. So we're still going to have some stressors. But in general, if you are adopting a single dog, I would recommend waiting approximately 6 months for them to be fully adjusted and acclimated to your home before looking for a buddy for them. And I think that's all that I have to say on integrating dogs together. So now we're going to look at integrating a new cat into our home. Cats, while there are dogs who are very sensitive to environmental changes, cats tend to be a bit more sensitive to environmental changes. So we want to make sure that we're reducing that cat stress as much as possible. So when we first bring them home, we're going to want to set them up in some sort of a small area. I often recommend utilizing, if you have like a spare bedroom or an office space or even a very large bathroom, to set the new cat up in one of these spaces where they can be by themselves with a closed door, so that they'll have a litter box in there, they will be fed in there, all that kind of stuff, so that they can kind of slowly acclimate to the home. Because oftentimes if we bring a cat home and then just let them out into our house as a whole, regardless of how large or small the space may be, that can be very overwhelming when you're a cat. That's a lot of space, and that can be incredibly overwhelming. And oftentimes I've heard that those are instances when cats choose, to find under the couch to hide and get stuck up in it, or under the bed or something like that, because often cats will hide when you initially bring them home, because they're not quite sure if they're safe yet. So allowing them a small space will allow them to slowly acclimate to the home, as well as slowly acclimating them to the smells that are in your home already, i.e. your resident pets, as well as allowing your resident pets to get used to the smell of this new cat without having to be face to face. And allowing them that smaller space will help to keep their stress levels lower, and providing them with their food and a litter box in that space will help you be able to monitor if they're feeling comfortable enough to use that litter box and to eat their food, even if they're not eating in front of you. So that way you can kind of keep tabs on how they're adjusting. And the more that they are coming out and not hiding when you are in their space, that'll kind of help you know when it's more or less the right time to start opening up their world a little bit more. And when we do start opening up their world a little bit more, I would recommend, instead of having the fully closed door, maybe adding a baby gate so that now your new cat and your resident pets can see each other. This is especially useful for cats and dogs, because then the cat can still get up and away, because often cats can jump over our baby gates. So cats can choose to come over and be with the dog, and they can choose to go back to the other side if being with the dog is too much. And that allows them to see each other as well as smelling each other without having to be face to face. And when we do start allowing them a little bit more space in the home, make sure that this is supervised time to monitor how everybody's doing together. If we have a little bit of hissing or things like that, that is okay. Again, just like I said with the dogs, this is them effectively communicating with each other. And as long as they're not escalating and you're not seeing anybody harming each other, allow them to kind of work it out. Most cats are going to give like a little growl or maybe a little hiss, and then they'll walk different directions. If you see one cat pinning another in a corner or something like that, that is absolutely an opportunity that you should intervene. But for the most part, they will learn to live with each other. And if we allow this kind of slow acclimation with getting used to each other's scent first, it's going to often go better. A note about kittens. Kittens, unlike puppies, do not have documented littermate syndrome. And kittens often do best when they have a buddy. Adopting 2 kittens, if that is an option to adopt 2 from the same litter, is often the best case scenario because they already have a buddy that they already know, and kittens will often help to keep each other out of trouble. And they do generally grow up just fine together, going through developmental stages together. But if you don't plan on adopting 2 kittens and you do want to take home a kitten, it is generally best if you have a younger cat that is still going to want to play with your kitten. Typically, and again, this is not every cat. There might be some very elderly cats who don't mind a kitten, but I would often say that older cats who just want to bake in the sun or something like that are not going to be super duper tolerant of a kitten's play style. So we want to make sure that the kitten has somebody that they can channel their energy with, whether that's another kitten from the same litter or a younger cat that will still want to play with them. And then when we are introducing cats and dogs, again, we want to make sure that we're utilizing baby gates. One thing that I find helpful is, And you also have to think about this with introducing a new dog to your resident cats. So your cat may be used to having full access to the entire house, but until you know for sure that your cat and dog are going to get along, you're going to want to make sure to limit their space. And again, utilizing baby gates can allow them to still access the house without having the dog in the full reign of the house. And that way the cat can feel a little bit more secure to kind of come and go as they please, and they can choose if they want to be around the dog or not. When you are working to introduce them, I would recommend keeping the dog on leash. And that way, again, if you need to quickly intervene, you already have them. And you're also going to want to reward for calm behavior around the cat. Some of our dogs can be very excitable when they see a cat, and it can be difficult to determine, especially initially, whether the excitement is because they want to chase the cat, which some cats are fine with being chased. And some dogs are very excited in wanting to play with the cat, but it can be hard to tell whether it's wanting to chase or wanting to play, especially initially, because it may just look like excitement. So another thing that you want to make sure that your cat is provided with is plenty of spaces for them to go up high, whether that's perches or cat trees or different things like that, so that they, again, have places to be up and away from the dog if needed. And you will want to start with some short sessions of exposing the cat and dog to each other, and try to always end on a positive note. I would keep these sessions to about 15-20 minutes. And if you do need to, close a door to allow some separation or add an additional baby gate so that the dog doesn't have access to the cat, you will figure out what's going to work best in your scenario, because obviously not all houses are set up the best to utilize baby gates. So you will need to find out what works best for you. Please remember that each pet is an individual, and each relationship that the pets have with each other will be unique. So even if your dog has prior experience with cats and vice versa, their relationship to each other may be different. So you may have a dog who, had a cat friend and they used to play together, but this new cat that you've brought in doesn't like to play with the dog like that. They will need to set those boundaries and figure out what this new relationship looks like. And the same goes with cats who have had experiences with dogs before. It may not look the same. That cat may have been fine with the dog that they lived with previously because the dog didn't bother them at all. It may be different if this dog does actually want to engage with them. So it's very important that we evaluate each of our animals as individuals and know that each relationship is also going to be unique. And it's up to us to keep their stress levels reduced as much as possible so that we can slowly and smoothly integrate them into the home together. And with that, I will ask if there are any questions.
Yes, there's a couple. So thank you, Krista. You were talking about just now about the individual animal and the environment. And you also said earlier that you recommend waiting 6 months after adopting one before adopting a second. I was wondering if, again, keeping in mind the individuality, if what the kind of guidelines are when you lose one pet and then you're looking to add a second member to the family again. How long is too short to wait, maybe?
Well, I mean, are you asking with regards to the pets or to
Yes.
the people?
The pets.
Okay. Honestly, again, that is going to be something that you would have to evaluate for each animal. Some animals seem to be much more affected by the loss of a friend, especially say that it is an animal friend that has always been in that home that they have lived with. They may have a hard time with it, and they may be struggling being on their own. But I would definitely say that I don't think that there's a really good timeline that I can give you for that, because some may respond to a new pet coming into the home and be thrilled that there's now this new pet, and some pets may take longer to be ready for a new pet. It is very challenging to say, because while it is obvious that they do experience grief, we do have to be careful not to put our human emotions onto our animals. So while it is clear that, they do mourn losses and things like that, when you bring a new animal in, they're not going to have the same thoughts that we may of we're trying to replace the animal. So they may not be going through that same sort of mental struggle that we would. But it's something that's really hard to give a firm answer on. The reason I say to wait 6 months in between adoptions is partially due to that rule of 3 that we talk about in the animal welfare world, where it takes them 3 days to decompress after coming home, up to 3 weeks to kind of learn the routine of the house, and then up to 3 months to fully feel at home. So then I give that additional 3 months so that you really feel like you know that animal, and the animal really feels safe and secure and like they fully know you, before we add an additional stressor. Because when we're trying to balance too many factors, that can be cause for us to make mistakes and for things to not go smoothly.
Yep.
So I like to focus on one individual animal at a time, instead of feeling like I'm juggling too much change and not being able to give the animal who's trying to adjust the focus that they need.
Wonderful answer. Thank you.
Hope that helped.
It does. I mean, it's very individual, but you brought up some great points there about reasons not to rush in, even though
Yes.
humans might want that.
Yeah.
Second question, in this post-COVID world, there's a lot more options to get your animals trained in your home versus taking them to an obedience class. And I was wondering if you have thoughts about that after you've introduced a new animal. Are there pros and cons to having somebody come to your house and maybe seeing how both dogs might interact versus giving them some alone time and getting the new guy some very separate training?
I mean, honestly, I think that there's pros to doing both options. If you're having trouble integrating them, I would definitely have somebody come over and kind of see the types of interactions, or at least get some advice on like, these seem to be, and this is going to be dependent on us paying attention and kind of closely watching, are there particular instances that they seem to be having issues? Are we noticing? Because there's some dogs where I'm like, they just might be done for the day, and that's where like structured nap times would come into play. Is like they've been dealing with this dog all day and they're just fed up at nighttime and they're done and they need some space. And so if you're having trouble actually integrating the two dogs, I would definitely recommend having someone come and see for themselves and kind of evaluate the relationship between the dogs themselves. But anytime that you are investing in one-on-one behavior training with your dog, that's a great opportunity for you and the dog to bond. So having them have those private sessions, whether that is one-on-one with someone or in a group class type of a situation, that's going to be a really good opportunity for the dog and you to build your bond. And it may also give the dog at home, the resident dog, an opportunity for a little bit of time alone. So both have their pros, and I think it really depends on what you're looking to gain from training.
Great points. Okay, well, thank you so much, Krista. And this webinar will be posted on the OPH portal